Hello and welcome to the Camo Grind, a series where I analyze every weapon in Advanced Warfare to help you complete every camo challenge by giving specific strategies, loadouts, and more, including ranking every weapon variant in order of usefulness based on several factors to give you an idea of what you should use and what you should redeem. I don't, however, just make this stuff up. My advice and opinions are based on thorough testing, in-game coded stats, and of course my own experiences in using these weapons and weapon variants, of which I own many, to complete every marksman challenge and earn every royalty camo. Today's episode is on the EM1 Heavy Directed Energy Weapon, the good old Call of Duty Laser Beam. This is the first heavy weapon we've covered on this series, so I'm excited for that. Let's get right to the variant ranking. I did my best to systematically put in order what I suggest you use, but of course they're just my opinions for you to use as a guide, and you can debate them with me if you like. No big shocker this time, I have the EM1 Poner as the best variant. I quite like the damage buff variants for this weapon. Rest assured, it is not a placebo. The regular damage profile of the EM1 is 18, 15, 12, but with the Poner you have 18, 18, 15. Obviously much improved in those middle and long ranges. Really quick, if you're confused about how the EM1 works and calculates damage, well, you can think of it as a regular weapon that shoots regular bullets, just really quickly. It's only the visuals that make it look like a laser. They actually revised how the EM1 worked in a patch at some point. It used to have lower damage, something like 6 to 5 to 4, if I remember, and it fired a projectile every single frame, so at 60 FPS that would be 3600 RPM, but because of that shooting every frame thing, if I'm not mistaken, this thing was pretty overpowered on PC since your frame rate could go higher. So its rate of fire was cut down to a third of that, being 1200 RPM now, and to make it similar to the way it was before, they did triple the damage to get that 18, 15, 12 I just mentioned. But back to the Poner, you get that awesome damage buff, and you also get a 10% ADS time decrease. That's always good. You might say this is often a hipfire focused weapon, but you might find yourself aiming more because this variant does nerf your hipfire accuracy by 10%, making that slightly less effective, and you'll also have 10% more recoil and a 10% faster overheat time. A lot of little nerfs there that I find to be minor annoyances, well worth it because of that relatively massive damage buff. With a regular damage profile of 18, 15, 12, you'd have to get 6 to 7 to 9 hits to kill with this thing. It's pretty tough to land 9 hits on someone at long range. But with the Poner's damage being 18, 18, 15, you completely cut off that 12 damage and therefore eliminate that ugly 9 hit to kill number, making this pretty useful at all ranges. 6 to 7 shots to kill sounds a lot better, and I will add you get an awesome purple beam. Unfortunately, I've never been able to earn this variant and I can't really showcase it. It's been one of the few I've wanted but have not received, but every time I found it on the ground, it's been incredible. In the number 2 slot, we find the variant I actually do have and am using most of the time, the EM1 LEL or LEL. This is of course another damage increase variant, this time only bringing the long range damage from 12 to 15. Not as impressive as the Poner, it leaves that middle range damage the way it was at 15. But that long range is the most important part of the damage buff anyway. It's much better than if it was at 18, 18, 12. That long range is where the hits to kill drop off to 9 as we discussed, and I like that this variant gets rid of that. The only other change to the LEL is a 10% nerf to recoil, which is annoying, but I think that's manageable. And most importantly, how could I forget, you get a bodacious blue beam. And in third here I have placed the other elite, the Polar Vortex, and also the EM1 Royalty, which is essentially the Polar Vortex with an added 10% range buff. You can consider it a slightly upgraded Polar Vortex. I just had a thought, wouldn't that be interesting if instead of Royalty variants being separate things that you get in supply drops, if when you earned and applied a Royalty camo to a gun, it would get that small buff, like the 25% faster reload, the extra reserve magazine, the 10% range buff, one of those things. I would think that's cooler than getting it in a supply drop, but I guess then they wouldn't sell as many supply drops, and people would probably complain regardless. Anyway, this variant is pretty interesting. You get a 20% improvement to your hipfire accuracy. That's the main focus of the variant, and you also get a 10% buff to how long you can hold down the trigger before overheating. The only downside is a 20% nerf to your ADS time, and you could easily argue that since this variant is all about helping your hipfire, you really won't be aiming down your sights much, and there isn't really any downside to the Polar Vortex, and I would agree with that. This is a very simple but strong variant, making the hipfire even stronger than it already is on the EM1 is quite powerful, and while I can't bring myself to rank it over the damage increasing variants, I'm sure some people will consider this their favorite EM1. So there we have my top 3 variants for the EM1. Hopefully you have one of those and you'll be in great shape. I also ranked the Dimension, the Last Laugh, or should I say the Last Laugh, and the Sweet Dreams as good variants to use if you have them. The Quantum is of course just that pre-order bonus thing with a gold look and no stat changes. Past the base variant, we have the End, the Magnified, and the M-Coil, and the Vera as variants I recommend you don't use at all. You can just sell them or ignore them. I won't explain every single variant in depth as that would take a lot of time and I don't think that would be that interesting, but if you disagree with where I've placed one of these, feel free to take it up with me in the comments. Fun random fact time. I found a weird little graphical bug when I was messing around with this. If you tap the trigger extremely quickly with the EM1, as fast as you can, tap and release, it's kind of hard to do consistently, but not too bad, you will see this weird brownish, somewhat mirrored color gradient thing flash on the screen for 1 frame. I'm on PS4, I don't know if it happens on all consoles, and I don't know why. I won't pretend to know like, oh, this must be a lighting effect overlay that they use, but because the input is so fast it doesn't have time to compute the multiplication and screening of the opacity of the overlay. Yeah, I don't know what this is, but it's slightly different every time, and it just happens when you tap the trigger quickly. Wait a minute. Fun random fact time over. Now we get to the camo challenges of the EM1. Should be pretty interesting because the EM1 is a fairly unique weapon and we have yet to cover a heavy weapon on the series. So we start off with long shots as with many weapon classes. With the EM1, I would definitely recommend hardcore for these long shots. You just saw the damage profile for the EM1 being 18, 15, 12. So in a regular mode, that's a lot of shots you need to hit in order to kill someone. But in hardcore, it's only going to be 2 to 3 hits, and that should happen fairly easily before the gun kicks up too much. If you have one of those damage increasing variants that we talked about, that'll be very helpful because it's guaranteed 2-shot at any range, and that's pretty easy to do if you line up your shot. In fact, if you're playing hardcore, I would actually consider the Lel better than the Pono, because that middle range damage is completely useless as long as it's still 15, that's a 2-shot kill. Anyway, definitely hardcore mode is the way to go for this one. Next, we have 80 hipfire kills, which is kind of an odd challenge for the heavy class, but it's super easy for the EM1. This weapon was made for this challenge. It really isn't challenging. It's just how most people play with this gun. Feel free to switch over to the Polar Vortex if you have it, that might help you a bit, but you really shouldn't need it. The EM1 is a hipfire machine. Maybe it's just a placebo, but I feel like running around with gung ho while hipfiring reduces the vertical recoil quite a bit, makes it easier to control. I say that I think it's almost certainly a placebo though, because you'll notice if I stand still and shoot, there's the visual effect of the gun kicking back. But running with gung ho, you don't get that effect at all, which makes it look easier to control. But regardless, something about running around with gung ho lightweight EM1 just feels very clean, and it's pretty effective. Next we have a standard challenge, 10 bloodthirsty medals, and again, if you need to get 4 kills with another weapon first and then get your 5th with the EM1 to earn this, that does work, but I think that the EM1 is more than good enough to earn bloodthirsties. Strafe medals are another pretty standard challenge. Hovering with overcharged exo hover makes this pretty easy, or you can just jump around a lot. It shouldn't be too hard. Skeet shooters can be kind of annoying because it does rely on other people jumping. If you're having trouble killing people in the air, I would suggest hardcore again for this because of that'll of course make the time to kill much faster, and if you see someone in the air, picking them off should be pretty easy. And finally we come to the no perks and no attachments challenges, which are pretty self-explanatory. So I think none of the challenges in the heavy category are that tough, so you should have a pretty easy time with them. If that's not the case, feel free to ask me any other questions. So next episode we'll be taking a look at the MDL. We can finally knock out the other special weapon, and it shouldn't be too difficult. There's a reason the crossbow was suggested much more than the MDL. I hope you are more knowledgeable about the EM1 now than you were 9 minutes ago, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.